What if I told you that there was a city bigger than London, bigger than Rome, bigger than anywhere else on Earth, with no wheels, no horses, no iron tools, and no natural farmland? What if that same city was also the cleanest metropolis on the planet, while every European capital was drowning in its own filth? And what if the secret to feeding 200,000 people every single day was something so disgusting, so counterintuitive, it would make a modern health inspector quit on the spot? Stay with me, because what the Aztecs built in the middle of a Mexican lake is one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. In 1325, a group of exiled warriors settled on a small, marshy island in a salty, brackish lake in central Mexico. Nobody wanted the swamp. Nobody thought you could build anything there. That island became Tenochtitlan. By the early 1500s, it housed roughly 200,000 people. London at the same time had maybe 50,000. Tenochtitlan wasn't just bigger, it was a different category of city entirely. A grid of canals instead of streets. A marketplace that stunned the Spanish conquistadors who came to destroy it. And a food system so efficient it has never been fully replicated in the 5 centuries since. Here's what makes it almost unbelievable. No wheels, no draft animals, no iron tools, and zero natural farmland. The island was surrounded by salty water that would kill crops. The mainland was controlled by enemies. So how did they feed a city the size of a modern stadium crowd every single day for 200 years? The Valley of Mexico sits in a closed basin with no river flowing out. Every drop of mountain runoff just pools. Over centuries, it formed 5 interconnected lakes, and the one Tenochtitlan sat in, Lake Texcoco, was the lowest point. Salt accumulated naturally. The water was poisonous to crops. The Mexica faced a brutal paradox, surrounded by water, dying of thirst, surrounded by a lake, starving for soil. So instead of abandoning the island, they decided to build the land themselves. But first, they had to solve the salt. In 1449, after a catastrophic flood, the rulers commissioned a 16-kilometer dike across the lake, built from cut stone, clay, and lime mortar, called the Nezahualcóyotl Dike. It separated the salty northern lake from the fresh southern lakes. By keeping the fresh water side slightly higher, it created hydraulic pressure that constantly pushed clean water through the city's canals, flushing waste outward and keeping salt from creeping back in. A 16-kilometer hydraulic valve, built without iron, without wheels. It worked perfectly until the Spanish knocked it down. Now, the thing people consistently get wrong, the so-called floating gardens, never floated. The Nahuatl word, chinampan, means in the fence of reeds. These were stationary, human-made agricultural plots anchored to the lake bed in the shallow freshwater zones of the southern lakes. You build one like this, stake out a rectangle, roughly 30 meters long and 3 meters wide. The stakes are made from ahuehuete willow, chosen because it roots in waterlogged soil and grows fast, turning from wooden stakes into living trees that permanently lock the structure in place. Weave reed mats between them to form a basket. Fill it with layers of aquatic weeds, brush, and mud, dredged from the canal floors, until the plot sits half a meter above the waterline. What you've built is a raised bed that waters itself. Because the plots are narrow and the soil is porous, water from the surrounding canals wicks upward into the root zone through capillary action, passive irrigation requiring zero labor. The plants are never thirsty. The lake also acts as a thermal battery, absorbing heat during the day and releasing it at night, creating a frost-protected microclimate that enabled year-round cultivation at high altitude, up to 7 harvests a year, on land that didn't exist a generation before. While one crop matured, the next was already germinating in nearby seedbeds, a technique called chapin. The moment you harvested, you transplanted. No fallow season, the land never rested. Now here's the genuinely shocking part. What made all of this work, what gave the chinampas their extraordinary fertility, was the city's own waste. Spanish conquistadors entering Tenochtitlan in 1519 described it as sparkling clean, while their own cities were essentially open sewers. That cleanliness wasn't aesthetic preference. It was the output of a system that treated human waste as a resource to be harvested. Public toilets along the major causeways were positioned over canoes, waiting below. Households kept ceramic jars to collect urine separately, used as a chemical fixative in the textile dyeing industry. Human feces were transported by canoe to the chinampa fields and applied as high-grade fertilizer. Demand was so high that waste was bought and sold at the city's main market alongside food and luxury goods. The Nahuatl word for gold, the most sacred material in the Aztec world, was Tenochtitlan. It literally means divine excrement. That wasn't a joke. It was a cosmological statement. What one level of existence discards, the next level builds from. Under Emperor Moctezuma II, littering was a crime. Elite children could be sentenced to death for excessive wastefulness. Resource management wasn't just policy, it was theology. Feeding 200,000 people isn't just a farming problem, it's a logistics problem. And here's where the wheel question actually matters. Tenochtitlan's streets were canals. Wheeled carts were useless here. But a canoe on a canal offers near zero friction. No horses, no roads, no energy wasted on uneven terrain. At its peak, historians estimate between 100,000 and 200,000 canoes operated on Lake Texcoco, roughly one per person. They were specialized, small dugouts for household errands, massive 50-foot spruce vessels carrying 3 tons of grain, dedicated waste collection canoes running the causeway circuit, and tribute vessels bringing food in from the productive southern provinces. Most of this movement happened before dawn. By sunrise, the Tlatelolco market, one of the largest anywhere on Earth, was fully stocked, with sections divided by product type and a standing board of judges regulating prices on the spot. The city also maintained a strategic grain reserve called the Petlacalco, capable of feeding the entire population for 20 years in the event of total crop failure. During the Great Famine of 1454, Emperor Moctezuma I opened those stores and delivered food directly to the poor by canal, processing grain into tamales at the storehouses themselves to prevent hoarding. When Cortés conquered Tenochtitlan in 1521, the Spanish didn't just defeat an army, they dismantled a system. They destroyed the Nezahualcóyotl dike during the siege and never rebuilt it. Without the dike separating the waters, salt water flooded back in and poisoned the remaining chinampa plots. Their solution was to drain the lakes entirely, a centuries-long project called the desagüe. By the early 20th century, the lakes were gone, and what happened next is still unfolding today. Without the water, the ancient lakebed soil began compacting under the city's weight. Mexico City has sunk by as much as 10 meters in some areas. Buildings tilt, the cathedral leans. The city that once mastered water now pumps it in from hundreds of miles away, while its ancient canals have been turned into sewers. The most sophisticated urban food system in the world was dismantled in a generation and replaced with one that is, 5 centuries later, on the verge of collapse. The cruel irony: researchers today are actively rediscovering the chinampa model. A floating farm in Rotterdam uses the same circular waste-to-food logic. Farmers in flood-prone Bangladesh are building traditional floating vegetable beds using the same layering technique. Agricultural scientists are identifying sites across Europe where chinampa-style systems could deliver food security while filtering wastewater and sequestering carbon. The Aztecs didn't fail to invent the wheel. They invented something better, a city that ran on water, fed itself on waste, and produced more food per acre than modern industrial agriculture can match. The question was never why they didn't use the wheel. The question is why we destroyed what they had. Let me know in the comments, do you think modern cities could realistically adopt something like the chinampa system? Curious where you land on it. If you want more videos like this, subscribing is the one thing that actually helps the channel, and it takes 2 seconds.